Our first reading this morning is from Genesis chapter 45, verses 3 through 11 and 15. Many years after being sold into slavery by his jealous brothers, Joseph reveals himself to them. Now the second in command in Egypt, Joseph reassures his brothers that God has used their evil intentions for good to preserve life during a devastating famine, and Joseph forgives them. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which they will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve you a remnant on earth, and keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty.' And he kissed all of his brothers and wept on them. And after that, his brothers talked with him." Here is our first reading. Our psalm today is Psalm number 37, verses 1 through 11 and 39 through 40. Do not be provoked by evildoers. Do not be jealous of those who do wrong. For they shall soon wither like the grass, and like the green grass fade away. Put your trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and find safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, who shall give you your heart's desire. Commit your way to the Lord. Put your trust in the Lord, and see what God will do. The Lord will make your vindication as clear as the light, and the justice of your case like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently. Do not be provoked by the one who prospers, the one who succeeds in evil schemes. Refrain from anger, leave rage alone. Do not be provoked, it leads only to evil. For evildoers shall be cut off, but those who hope in the Lord shall possess the land. In a little while the wicked shall do no more. Even if you search out their place, they will not be there. But the lowly shall possess the land. They will delight in abundance of peace. But the ignorance of the righteous comes from you, O Lord. You are their stronghold in times of trouble. You, O Lord, will help them and rescue them. You will rescue them from the wicked and deliver them, because in you they seek refuge. Here's our psalm. Our second reading today is from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 35 to 38 and 42 to 50. In the Apostles' Creed, we speak of the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting. Using the metaphor of a planted seed in the story of Adam, Paul preaches passionately about the mystery of following Christ's perfect life into eternity. Paul says, "But someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body do they come from? Fool, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And as for what you sow, you do not sow the body that is to be, but a bare seed, perhaps of wheat or of some other grain. But God gives it a body as he has chosen, and to each kind of seed is his own body. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable. What is raised is imperishable. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a physical body. It is raised a spiritual body. If there is a physical body, there is also a spiritual body. Thus it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a living, giving spirit. But it is not the spiritual that is first, but the physical, and then the spiritual. The first man was made from earth, a man of dust. The second man is from heaven. As was the man of dust, so are those who are of dust. And as is the man of heaven, so are those who are of heaven. Just as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we also bear the image of the man of heaven. What I am saying, brothers and sisters, is this: flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Here ends our second reading. Please stand for the gospel acclamation.
Gospel this morning is Luke chapter 6, verses 27 through 38. Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus said, "But I say to you that listen, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies. Do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Christ. You may be seated. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I have a few friends in the military or who have been in the military, and I hear this adage get thrown around sometimes, and I think it's really great. It's no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And isn't that true to life? How many times have we planned something out, we have a great idea, we have all the theory worked out, we know exactly how this is going to go, and then we try to apply it, and it all falls apart. I assume most of us can relate. Hopefully it's not just me. Now, as much as my professors might get mad at me for saying this, don't worry, I don't think they watch my YouTube videos. and some of my seminary colleagues might get mad at me for saying this, I think we could say something similar in the church, that being no theology survives a simple reading of the Bible. This includes Lutheran theology. Again, some of you might be thinking, ouch, oh no, this is my theology my whole life. And certainly, even if you're not thinking that, my professors are thinking, oh, wow, F, expel this guy. Don't worry, I don't think they watch my videos. But it's kind of true here. If you're a close student of Lutheran theology who believes in the saint-sinner, that we're both a saint and a sinner at the same time, and that atonement is completely accomplished by Jesus, there's no work that we have to do to be credited favor from God, and if you believe that, if you're a theologian of the cross, as Luther put it, who believes that sometimes suffering is part of the Christian life, even if you're doing your best to help others, you still might suffer in return. If you believe all of those things, as, well, we're brought up to believe in the Lutheran Church, you might look at this and think, oh no, that's not what this says. I could almost imagine a seminary student taking a time machine back in time and visiting Jesus here, walking up to Jesus after the sermon and saying, you know, Jesus, that was really interesting, but Martin Luther said something different, Jesus. You know, you said this whole thing about sinners do the same, implying that we're not sinners, but Martin Luther said we're both sinners and saints, Jesus. And you said this whole thing about what credit is that to you, implying that we can earn credit from God for doing good things to other people. But Martin Luther said that we don't have to be credited anything from God for our good behavior. All the credit from God comes simply because of through the cross and the atonement work by God on the cross. And you say this thing, Jesus, about how we'll have a share running over in return, great blessings in return for the things that we do. But Martin Luther says sometimes there's suffering involved, and sometimes you don't receive blessings in return for good works. So Jesus, I could recommend a few seminary professors who could correct your theology if you're interested. Of course, Jesus would respond in this situation with confusion, because I don't think he spoke English. But perhaps more confusion in that we should not try to fit Jesus' theology into our seminary's theology. Martin Luther came 1,500 years after Jesus and was trying to make sense of what Jesus does. In fact, all theological systems do this. Any theology, the best it can do is say, we're going to do our best to try to understand who God is, what God has done, and what God continues doing. But because the Bible is written by many different theologians who believe slightly differently, whenever we try to have a comprehensive theology, we'll occasionally run into situations where it doesn't work. We'll have passages that will say, this is great, this is exactly what I believe. And then we'll have passages where we'll say, I can kind of cram it into my beliefs. And then we'll have passages where we say, I have no idea what to do with this. Now, the better theologies try to make good work of Scripture comprehensively and make sure to make it logical and reasonable and make sense and just use common sense. And to its credit, Lutheranism does that. Obviously, I'm a Lutheran. I'm not going to tell you that Lutheranism is a bad idea, but it has its limits. And I think we might run into a limit here. It's been a while since it's been kind of cold out some days, and I've been really busy, so I haven't gotten to go out to my garage and lift weights like I try to do pretty regularly. But I still remember how to do it. There's one bit of advice that I think applies here. I don't know if you're all familiar with the major lifts of working out, but one of the biggest ones is deadlift. And the advice that they give you for deadlifting is bring your body to the bar, not the bar to your body. Because when you have 450 pounds lying on the ground, if you try to stand a foot away from it and then pull it over to yourself, it won't work. You'll mess everything up. You need to set yourself up, leave the bar where it is. I think that this applies in this case because we have a tendency, once we really have a set of beliefs that we cling to say, this makes sense, I will bring Jesus to Luther instead of the other way around, which I think Luther would agree with is bending Luther to meet Jesus. The reason I say all of this is not to disparage Lutheranism, but to say sometimes we need to acknowledge that there are places where it's difficult. There are tensions in the Bible. There's places where it's hard to make sense of things. And when that happens, it's okay to have the tension. I'm not going to try to give a clear answer that will fix this, that will get rid of the tension. I think it's supposed to be there. If you were expecting something nicer, I'm sorry. Sometimes you just have to deal with the ambiguity. I want us to take some time to just think about what this means to us when the theology we've been taught to believe struggles to fit with what the Bible that we're supposed to believe is saying. But I also have more to do here. There is a way that we can make it a little more Lutheran, and this does kind of make sense. I want to focus on one thing in particular. Luther believed that we are simultaneously saints and sinners, and I agree with him. I think that's right. To be clear, it's not that we're saints of our own merit and sinners also of our own merit. It's that we're sinners because that's what we are. But when we're baptized, when Jesus comes into our lives, Jesus transfers his own righteousness to us. Christ makes us saints. We don't earn it ourselves. But because of that, because we do have our own sinfulness, but also bear Christ's righteousness, we can be both. Here, Jesus does not seem to be saying that we're both sinners and saints simultaneously. It sounds like Jesus is encouraging his disciples to be just saints. A plain reading makes it almost seem kind of mean, almost like there's two different classes of people. Jesus said, even sinners do good to those who do good to them. You're supposed to be better than that, better than the sinners. And me believing that I'm a saint and a sinner think, well, gosh, this is hard. How can I be better than the person that I am? Now, of course, you could say that this is what the process of sanctification is all about, that we're working on being better than our sinful selves. And this is true. This is a good way to take it. It's not wrong. But I think there's also something else here. The things that Jesus is telling us to do to set us apart from sinners are, if we're being honest, kind of crazy. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do these things, but if we give all of our possessions away and don't expect anything in return, eventually we'll have no possessions, which is not necessarily bad, but when you have children that you might need to take care of, or your own physical well-being that you might need to take care of, giving everything you have away without expecting anything in return is a good way to put yourself in an early grave, or to send your children off begging, which is probably not what Jesus necessarily wants us to do. If we take what Jesus says here to the extreme, we'll give so much of ourselves that we'll have nothing left to give. There's a balance that isn't stated here, but is maybe implied, that we need to be good stewards. And sometimes that means, give some money to the homeless person. You know he won't give anything back, but just give the money. Of course, some people will say that we need to be better stewards about how we do this. Say, give them a gift card to Walmart instead of just cash. Some people say give them cash whatever you believe, there are times when, you just need to give the money. Make sure they have something. That's enough. But when someone comes to you saying, hey, I need $5,000 by Monday so I can buy a new car, you might say, I'm sorry, I don't have it. And even if I did, I need to use this money for other things. And that's okay. The problem is that in reality, we live in a world where even a good decision, what seems like the right thing to do, as implied by Jesus here, is also a bad thing to do. Because if we give so much to someone, then we won't be able to give anything to anyone else. And I'm not suggesting that we be stingy for the sake of being generous later, but I am suggesting that we do have to make difficult decisions. It's not just our fault individually. It is the world we live in. We can't give everything away. Perhaps this is what Luther was thinking about in his theology when he indicates that sanctification is not something that happens this side of eternity. We don't become perfect. We will always be sinners. As long as we're alive in this world, we will be sinful. We can't escape it. That's not just, well, it is partially because as individuals we are sinful, but it's also because the world is sinful. We can't meet the expectations Jesus calls us to meet, because if we did, we'd be hurting other people. The world doesn't let us make those decisions. We can't be perfect. So we're stuck being sinners. The exact people that Jesus is saying, don't be like that, be better, we can't be anything other. And the more I think about it, the more I think that Jesus knew that. Certainly the early church did pool their resources and share it with each other, so there was a lot of giving up what they had, but it was still sharing it within the community. I don't think Jesus was saying, give everything to everyone outside of the community so all of you just starve to death. I don't think Jesus was necessarily saying that we need to be perfect by following this so extremely that we give everything away. I think it's very possible that Jesus said this to let us know that we are sinners, that it's not something we can fix. But when you come to this realization and you realize not only can I not escape being a sinner, but neither can anyone else, we can start to realize that it's bigger than just us, bigger than you and me, bigger than this entire church. The problem of sin is a worldwide problem. The problem of sin puts us into situations where I might be asked to give a whole bunch of things away because other people have so much less. Poverty is the problem that leads us to need to give away. That leads us to potentially be afraid that someone will take what we have. But if poverty were not around, if that were not an issue, then Jesus' advice here on how not to be a sinner wouldn't even apply. We wouldn't need to lend without expecting to get back. Everyone would have enough. Unfortunately, we also can't fix poverty. We've been waging war on poverty for years, and we have not prevailed. Even Jesus said, there will always be poor among you. But when we realize that it's not a small thing, the problems we're facing that put us in these situations that leave us trapped in sin are huge, we can open our eyes to the world, to what it really is, to the fight that God is fighting, to try to make the world a better place. And ultimately we can look forward to paradise when there is no poverty, when there is no sickness, when there is no disunity between people, where we all live as one happy family on earth. But seeing the world as it is now, and seeing where it's supposed to go, we can acknowledge that while we're still sinners, there might be something we can do about it. Perhaps Jesus isn't telling us exactly this is what we need to do, but rather giving us an awareness of what needs to be done. And maybe awareness is the first step to fighting the fight that will lead to a change that's much bigger than any change we can make. The change that God really calls for is a world renewed. Thanks be to God. Amen.